a younger Abraham wouldn't have been able to accept that. But an older Abraham that had gone through some trials was like, if that's what I have to do, that's what I have to do. And the father of faith, yes. But what did he say? He said, I have enough faith that God will raise him back up. That's what he said his faith was. The faith that God can raise him back up. But look at even accepting that God would tell him to sacrifice his son. And a man named Moses, that God told him to go back to Egypt and tell Pharaoh to let his people go. Oh, that sounds real good in church. Let my people go. We're saying thousands of years later, yeah, of course. But think about Moses. I'm going to walk up to Pharaoh. I'm a fugitive. I'm wanted for murder. I'm going to walk up there and I'm going to tell him, this fugitive, this man that is running and has left because of murder is going to walk up to the most powerful man in the world and tell him to let the people go. Think about that. But what happened was 40 years earlier, he ran. He didn't even face up to what he did. He ran. And now, 40 years later, God's telling him, go back and talk to this man. And not only talk to him, you tell him to let these people go. But what happened is 40 years in the wilderness changed him. He went from running to going back. And going back and not only standing there, but asking for more. But because of what he's went through in the wilderness, he was able to accept his assignment. He accepted his assignment because of what he went through. But 40 years prior, why didn't God just tell him then to go and do it? He wasn't ready to hear that. In fact, he even struggled 40 years later. I'm not eloquent of speech. I'm slow of tongue. He had a speeching impediment. So he says, talk to your brother, have him help you out. That's what he told him. Get your brother Aaron, he can speak well, get him to help you. That's what the Lord told him. But he still did what he was told to do. But to him, that was a new thought. To us, it's not new because we've heard it all our life. But to him, it was new. All of a sudden, a man called Jesus comes to the scene. And he was breaking all the rules of man. I'm not going to say he broke the rules of the word, because he didn't. He didn't break the mitzvot. He broke some of the traditions and ways of man. But he didn't break the mitzvot. Some people believe he did, but he didn't. He followed the covenants. He followed the laws that were given to them. He went to the temple. He ate kosher. He did these things. Say, how do you know? One of the examples, you remember when Peter had a vision and Peter said this, I have never ate anything unkosher. Do you remember that? So if Peter was with Jesus and Jesus was eating unkosher, then Peter would have ate unkosher. But Jesus didn't eat unkosher. Say, well, why are you telling me that? Because people will say, well, he broke all the rules. He broke the rules of man. And he would do things that they were like, what is he saying? Even his disciples. Do you remember when Jesus is telling them, he's going to die? And Peter's like, no way. No way. It's not going to happen. And what did Jesus respond to Peter? Get behind me, Satan. That's what he told him. To Peter, this was a new thought. And he's like, no way. And Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. That's what he told him. But to Peter, it was a new thought. That bottle at that moment wasn't willing to accept that new wine. And he's like, Peter, you better get it ready, because it's going to happen. And you remember what happened with Peter? When it was happening, he got around the fire with the other ones, and this is what happened. He started cussing and acting different so that they would think that he wasn't a disciple. That's how unwilling he was to accept that new wine of that thought of Jesus dying on the cross. But he did eventually accept it. He eventually embraced it. But what caused him to embrace it? When his world got rocked? Because Peter's thinking was, this is it. The kingdom is here. And the kingdom was there, but not to the way Peter thought it was. That Jesus was going to set it up, and he's going to come, and he's going to be on the throne, and everyone's going to know it. And Peter was all for that, but that's not how it went down. So many people want things to go a certain way, and they get stuck in that area. This is the way it is, this is the way it's going to be, and this is the way it should be. But what happens is we go through hard times. And in those hard times, it causes us to have to look at things different. Abraham had to see something different. Moses had to see something different. Peter had to see something different. And the man Saul, who became Paul, he needed to get knocked off his horse. It's like new wine has to go in a new bottle, so you're coming off your horse, buddy. And how did Paul say it? Lord, who art thou? He knew it was the Lord. He just didn't know it was Jesus. But he knew it was the Lord. And then he says, why do you kick against the pricks? Why do you kick against the pricks? And some of us, what we do is we kick against the pricks of a new understanding, a revelation, an epiphany. We get stuck and we say the old is better. And I'm not talking about the Old Testament, because for some of us, the Old Testament is new. That didn't work. What I'm saying is the Old Testament is new because we haven't even allowed it to be read to us. What, they were scared of the Old Testament? That it's going to contradict our understanding? It's going to contradict what we believe? No, it shouldn't. Because if it does, then we need to change something. But not the word, our thinking. But we kick against the pricks. Because the old is better. That's the way I was born, and that's the way I'm going to die. That's kicking against the pricks. Have you ever heard the term born again? Verily, verily, I say unto you, you must be born again. Why? Because many of us, we don't understand that that's what born again is part of, is that we're born again, and many of our thoughts, we find out we're wrong.